If you were to compile a list of commonly asked, problematic questions, where are you really from? Would most definitely be near the top. Hi, I'm Ruby, and I'm from Massachusetts. I'm not talking about when another Asian person wants to know what kind of Asian I am. That doesn't really offend me. Some Asians just like to guess, and usually they get it wrong. But in all seriousness, I understand being curious. But if you really want to know my background, then you should know that I'm from here. And you don't even have to be a Chinese adoptee or a transracial adoptee to be irked by this. But if you are, it's like we've lived here practically our entire lives and we grew up speaking English. So if I do say I'm Chinese, it gets a lot more complicated. It feels like I'm not telling the whole truth because being Chinese comes with assumptions about my Chinese upbringing. If I'm specifically talking to other Asians and I say I'm Chinese, they may try to relate to me on levels that I may or may not be able to connect with because I'm adopted. It's not the same as growing up in an Asian household with immigrant parents. That's not my experience. So to some, I may not be Chinese enough to actually be Chinese. I know there's not one way to be, but it often feels like there is. Being fully one thing or the other and fitting into a box is the standard we're told to strive for. Because it's straightforward, because it's easier to grasp and gloss over with assumptions, because understanding takes more work. I think feeling like an outsider, in whatever sense, is something that every human being has felt at one point or another. And most of the time, it's not a blatant rejection, but a subtle shun from the group. Something small enough to get under the skin. I've never felt unwelcome in the Jewish community, but it's always a weird feeling because outside of the few friends I grew up with who are also Jewish Asian adoptees, I had never seen another Asian person at temple or Jewish summer camp or Hebrew school. For me, I'm othered because I'm a minority in a predominantly white society and because I'm an adoptee of Chinese heritage who also sticks out in that community too. The transracial adoptee paradox is just that. Chinese adoptees are ethnic minorities, but we're often treated like we're not. We're perceived as white by those who know we're adopted, but for those who don't, we're just another Asian. Richard M. Lee says, there remains a tendency to portray racial ethnic minority adoptees as passive recipients of the transracial adoption paradox. In reality, we're actively engaging with our identities each and every day. I interviewed Jialin about her experiences as a Chinese Canadian adoptee. We met through 23andMe and connected a while back, but it was really cool to talk to her for the first time and hear about her story. So here she is.
My name is Jialin Podak. I'm 19 years old and I currently live in Canada, just a little south of Toronto. And I was born in Anhui, China, and I came to Canada in 2002, so a year after I was born. And I actually landed in Canada on my very first birthday. Just a little fun fact. I just finished first year university at University of British Columbia on the West Coast, and I'm currently studying Asian studies. I think just looking Asian, I I mean naturally with interracial adoptions, parents can't really say that they're your biological parents. They kind of have to tell you straight up as soon as you're able to comprehend that because you don't at all
Yeah.
look like your parents. Um, so from a little kid, I've always known I was Chinese and I looked different. But I think it wasn't until maybe late middle, like grade 8, early high school, when I really started thinking about my own heritage and being Chinese and kind of what that meant and within society and within Canada. So yeah, and then that's also like you, I joined the Facebook group like early high school because that's when I really started getting interested in that and wanting to explore. more of that part of myself. I've been lucky that I would say in elementary school and middle school, there was always some other Asians in my class, and I made Asian friends. But when I got to high school, a large majority of people in my school were Asian.
Oh,
And
wow.
so that was, yeah, that was really, it was kind of nice to just like be in a classroom and see people that looked like you.
Yeah, yeah.
But at the same time, sometimes I feel like because I don't fully know our own heritage and culture, sometimes
Mhm.
I get kind of embarrassed if I'm with other Asians or Asian Americans that are know their own
Right,
heritage
right.
more. Do you know
Right,
what I
right,
mean?
right,
Like
yeah.
I'm like, oh, I can't fully relate to that experience. I can half relate. Yeah, I've been back once in grade 8. So I was really young, and I honestly don't remember a lot of it. Also, at that time, because I was so young, I think I just didn't think about my own heritage as in the way that I think about it now. So I didn't really value the experience. I was just like, okay, we're in China. That's fun. I managed to go visit my orphanage, but again, I was so young, I don't really remember it. But I know I was left at like in the bushes in front of the orphanage, and that one of the security guards that night just heard me crying and found me. So I did actually get to meet the security guard that found me. But for sure I'd love to go back and like maybe live there for a period of time, now that I'm older and more interested in finding my own heritage. The one that always comes to mind for me is when people ask after they find out that I'm adopted, they're like,
Mhm.
do you want to meet your real parents? And I'm
Mhm,
like,
mhm.
I know most of the time people don't mean real parents as in like
Yeah,
to invalidate our adoptive parents. It's just kind of like a misuse of the word, but it always ticks me off a little just because
yeah.
my real parents, I would say, are my adopted parents because they were the people who raised me from a young age and supported me and like provided for me. Um, Whereas then my biological parents, like
Yeah, yeah.
there's a difference. Like you can have two sets of real parents, I think,
Mhm,
just in different
mhm.
contexts. And I know for some adoptees it's like a very touchy subject. For me, I don't mind if people like ask that in that did you want to meet your adopted or your sorry, your biological parents? Like
Mhm. Yeah.
I would if I could. I'm interested to see if I could, but like I just also kind of wish people would have a little more like sensitivity if they don't know the person
Yeah.
well and they aren't sure how that person feels about talking about their own adoption. I get kind of when people assume that like I'm really really fortunate to be adopted, which like I am, and I love my family. My family has supported me, but I've been lucky in that I've had a really great family that's taken care of me. But like I know not every adoptee is adopted into a supporting family that will kind of like with the white savior complex.
Mhm.
I feel like a lot of people don't even realize that that's a thing that sometimes adoptive parents can get, oh, I brought you to my home from this like developing country. You should be so grateful. I've provided you with a place to live and stuff. I feel like for being a parent, providing a roof over someone's head and giving them food and clothes, like that shouldn't be the standard. That's the bare minimum. If you're gonna have a child, you should like
Definitely.
already just expect to do that and then
Mhm.
do more. Yeah, no, I think it should really be up to the child's decision because, like, as much as you're a part of their life, that section of their life and their biological heritage
Mhm.
is, I feel like, really their decision.
Yeah.
I think though, let's say you got contacted by someone and you have the means to connect with your child's biological family, but they're still really young, maybe you might like hold on to that connection and then wait until your child's a little older and say like, if this is of interest of you, I would love to support you in this and I have
Yeah.
this connection pre-made. But I
Mm.
would definitely wait until they're older or they come to you asking about that because I know I didn't start thinking about it like you until I was
Yeah.
a lot older. So my parents asked me that when I was 8 versus me that when I was 15, they'd be like completely different answers. The YouTube thing, I I think just overall I wouldn't want to post about my child or like
Mhm.
in such a in-depth um way
Right, right.
until they're older and they like actually acknowledge that like wow, thousands of people can see me and like learn about me and my life. Do I really want that? I feel like in a lot of media or like in the world, I think people are aware. Like when you say you're adopted from China, nobody's like, "Oh my gosh, I've never heard of someone adopted from China." That sounds, but
Right,
it's kind of
right.
like we're like hidden
Mhm,
in
mhm,
society. Like I always feel like whenever I hear of an adoptee in media, they're kind of
mhm.
just like they're there, but they're really quiet, and you don't really delve into their story of being adopted that much. I remember this book because my parents got it for me as a child. It was like a picture book about a little girl from China being adopted. I really don't remember the name. I think I actually
Gotcha.
might have it, but I really, really liked that book growing up because I was like, she's just like me. She's adopted from China. Oh my gosh.
I don't know, it was
All I
like a picture of a
remember,
girl with a hat on, like a baby's face with, like, a hat.
yeah,
Was it that book? Okay.
I think so. There was that one, and then I think I got another one. All I remember from it was that they baked cookies. It was, they made sugar cookies and like they cut them out in all of the girls' family members. Um, one maybe piece of advice for someone who's like not adopted but
Mhm.
wants to learn more or like has met someone who is adopted and is kind of interested, like
Yeah.
at least for me personally, I like don't mind if people ask and are like like genuinely interested and come and ask me in like a really polite way. And when people are like, "Oh, you don't have to answer this if you are uncomfortable," like I love talking to people about being adopted and like sharing my experience. So I would just say if you're interested, just ask. And worst case, the person will say, "No, I don't feel like talking about it."
We talked a lot during the discussion, but one of the things we touched upon was feeling different from Asian Americans and Asian Canadians. It's this feeling of comfort being surrounded by people who look like you, but then there's this layer of discomfort because we can't always relate to them. I think for me, I tend to overcompensate for this by trying to connect to my roots. I am genuinely interested, but it's also this feeling of responsibility that I feel to learn about Chinese culture. So it's a combination of wonder and the pressure I put on myself and society's expectations. It's discouraging because I haven't made as much progress as I would have liked at this point. I'm also super hard on myself, so that could also be a factor. I think it's important to note that as Chinese adoptees, we're never going to feel like we're completely knowledgeable about Chinese culture and our heritage, the good and the bad, because there are so many things that are impossible to learn and teach yourself, things that you just have to grow up with to understand fully. Edward T. Hall's cultural iceberg model shows that culture is not simply taught, but inherited, below the surface, and not easily accessible. The external or conscious parts of culture are things that can be seen. So things like food, fashion, music, holidays, festivals, language. The internal or below the surface subconscious parts of culture are things like beliefs, thought patterns, attitudes, values, concepts, notions, things like that. My understanding of Chinese culture will always be somewhat surface level, though that doesn't mean that I can't make space for myself or make connections in other ways. In college, I joined the Asian Student Alliance during my freshman year, and during my senior year, I served as the vice president. This was a positive experience because I was able to meet new friends and work towards bringing more representation to my university's events. I wasn't singled out like I thought I would be when I was first deciding whether to attend my first club meeting. And as I kept going throughout the years to ASA events and meetings and just different like bonding trips that we would have, going out for boba, um, going to New Haven to get ramen or just some kind of like Asian cuisine, I realized that this organization really helped me to break down the barriers and preconceived notions that I had about not being good enough, about not being good enough to fit in with an Asian American organization on campus, about not knowing if I would be able to fit in, not knowing if I'd be accepted. And beyond that, I found that there was a place for Asian adoptees in the API entertainment world. Working as an editorial intern at an Asian American media company was another rewarding experience that made me realize how much work there needs to be done, but also how far we've come as a community. Being mentored and surrounded by Asian Americans each day, and then learning about creative, inspiring people in the industry pushed me to become a better writer. Though I struggled to feel confident, I just wanted to prove myself, and I didn't want to disappoint anyone and make them regret choosing me. What I took from both of these experiences is the value of surrounding myself with people who contribute to my sense of belonging and not being afraid to explore that. I'm sure it was scary, putting myself out there, but honestly, the fact that I was accepted into those groups and into those situations made all the difference. I think the question about whether or not transracial adoptees feel comfortable pursuing these connections really depends on whether or not they feel welcomed in these spaces. Not every single attempt to find a place where we belong is always going to, result in feeling accepted and feeling that validation, but I think it's important that we put ourselves out there, but not push ourselves too much. If it feels like too much of a stretch, or if it feels uncomfortable, or it's just not a good fit, then we shouldn't push ourselves to fit into those situations and into those spaces. It's really just up to each of us individually to find out what works best for us, and not to look at someone else or not to compare ourselves to another adoptee who's making different connections than us, and to compare ourselves and to see, what we could be doing to be like them. We just have to think about it in terms of what we feel comfortable with. NPR's Code Switch has an episode about transracial adoptees titled Our Homeland is Each Other. And side note, I can't recommend this podcast enough. Hosts Jean Demby and Shireen Marisol Meraji interviewed a handful of adoptees, but one quote in particular stuck out to me. Caitlin Howe, a Korean adoptee, said, "I think that there's this assumption that the longing is for birth culture, but a lot of times it's a longing for like a deep connection to people that are like you." Growing up alongside fellow Asian adoptees who were like family made me feel less alone. And into the future, I genuinely really hope to continue to connect with other adoptees, because they're the ones who really know what it's like. And there's no need to explain things because it's just understood.